with a big stand like Stone Cold with a few beers. Play the game, I end the game, I'm champion and I'm Triple H. Undertaker, I'm your maker, bury the brother like Kane. Ooh, 1-3, hit the tombstone, hit the choke slam on face. Ooh, yeah, like a macho heel, turn like a muscle. If you sell a lot of tomatoes, I'ma keep a couple models. Ooh, and you may call me HBK when I'm tuning up the band, you best be getting in my way. Ooh, yeah, I'm degenerate, I love it, yes, I love it. If you ain't down with that, then I got two as well, you suck it. Too sweet, put your fangs up. Too sweet, hold another cup. Let's be busy, 23, got me feeling way too sweet.
I am joined here today by the co-promoter, easy for me to say, of Oceania Pro Wrestling. He is a former CEO of Baseball Australia, Hockey Australia, COO of the North Melbourne Football Club. This guy knows about business. Cam Vale, thank you very much for joining us, mate.
Thanks, Todd. I think I know a bit about the business of sport. I'd like to claim I know about the winning and losing, but then it opens up a whole Pandora's box of, claiming good wins, but then being responsible for good losses. So, yes, been around sport for a little while.
Which brings me around to the question, mate. You've been in normal sport. Why the hell would you get into professional wrestling?
Well, because it's the best sport, right? So it's time for me to graduate and elevate from the minor leagues to the big stuff. So, look, I've been a fan, for a long time. And the typical story, as a kid, growing up watching WWE and particularly with Hogan and the influence, so I think which generally gives people the age away when you're influenced. So. And then followed it pretty much all my life as a fan. But, a couple of points I've always been interested in the business side, particularly, when you go back to sort of the Monday Night Wars, and that was even as a sports professional, there's a lot to observe about that. There's been a lot to follow even in my sporting career around how wrestling works from all sorts of business aspects, the commercial side, particularly the broadcast, and then in the last 10 years, digital media. But when I was at North Melbourne Footy Club, I had an opportunity to do a study tour to the US. I was really interested in talking to 3 or 4 sports or brands that were sort of challenger, emerging or had a big competitor. So I got to meet with the TNA, now Impact guys, and particularly Michael Webber, a lot of wrestling fans would know. And I was really, it was great because it was wrestling, and I got to, meet some people that got some really good promos back for North Melbourne Footy Club out of it. And but it really sort of generated my interest in the business side. And I sort of thought, I'll just see how things go after the rest of my career. And it certainly went in the way that it did. When I finished with baseball, reconnected with a few people, and they started to encourage me to go, well, maybe you should do something in this space if you've got the time and, you're not committed now to another role. And it just sort of morphed from there, just slowly over the last, probably the last 2 years, to be honest. It started to be in the back of my mind as to maybe I could do something in this space, or maybe I should, reconnect and try and get Mike to give me a job from Fight or whatever it might be. But the interest in wrestling and the combat sports I've always had, and it just sort of slowly morphed into it. And I've been influenced by the international part and connections I've made and built, but also the Australian part. And probably that's been the biggest catalyst to go from interest and, is it a job or whatever, compared to I was maybe one of the typical people that followed, WWE, knew a bit about the other international brands and knew virtually nothing about Australian wrestling. And I saw an MCW event at an Australian Baseball League game. So MCW put on an event, must have been in 2020, just before COVID.
It's like a charity show, wasn't it?
Yeah. Right. So we had the Melbourne Aces, the baseball team in our National League, they had their afternoon game on Sunday, I think it was. Melbourne City Wrestling then set up. A large part of the crowd stayed, but my kids stayed. I was really fascinated by it, obviously, as a wrestling fan. And they put on a really good show, an outdoor show. It was, and it just, again, as I then got into it and started following a few more of the different brands around Australia, the quality of the wrestling and the effort of these people that are running these promotions, it both shocked me, but at the same time, when I started to match it to what I've done in sport, I thought, well, hang on a minute, this is exactly like, especially the baseball links were very strong. You know, whether it's baseball clubs around the country or the state bodies, you know, that's the parallel I draw to, you know, the various promotions around Australia. And again, that in Australian baseball, we always felt our talent was underrated, and the thousands best, you know, baseball out of the US was seen as better than, you know, our national team players. And, you know, there's an inherent bias, I think, sometimes because we are that far away, you know, in different international sports. I think it's the same probably in some of the other ones, basketball, soccer, that our talent gets underrated. And, you know, me, again, as a local person, had also overlooked the fact that, you know, the Rhea Ripleys and Tony Storms and Buddy Matthews, they must be coming from somewhere in Australia. And just really, and so for me, it was like there's two parallel things of, you know, my sporting experience and everything I was thinking about doing in another sport running parallel with the wrestling business knowledge for me just kept picking up, and all of a sudden it crossed over to go, yeah, I don't know the industry as well as obviously a lot of people, but what worked for me in baseball and hockey was almost being, you know, not an outsider, but somebody who is unattached, has a certain skill set, and can I bring it in and help grow this sport. And I know we sort of joked at the start, but I honestly look at it like a sporting industry, like the other ones I've worked in, that you know, hopefully it should be on a higher platform. And it's certainly not criticizing anyone involved, because it's just there's so many different biases. And you know, look at what the NBL has done in basketball. Look at what the A-League's done. When those leagues started, they were also downplayed. You know, the big brands, and it's the gap's too big, and you know, everyone watches NBA. Well, now people watch the NBL, they watch the NBA, they watch the A-League, they watch the Premier League. We see the path that is a direct link, not some, you know, obscure link, talent from those leagues. And I see wrestling the same. Why wouldn't our talent? And I know it has happened, but you know, I think there's a platform maybe for a bigger experience and outcomes, and hopefully, you know, that's where the Starrcast one really came about, is to go, well, without me trying to solve all the world's problems in one hit, why don't I, you know, put some skin in the game, and let's see if we can get a mega event that is great to bring those brands and talent here, but also to bring, you know, our best talent and promotions on that journey as well.
Yeah, I think I had this conversation with somebody not too long ago, and we were talking about like just how many independent promotions there are in America as opposed to Australia. And then inherently, because there's so many lesser in Australia, the workers have to be really good to be able to get onto those really good shows. So almost to the fact where, like, if they went to America the way they are now, these guys, the American guys and the local promotions, would be like, where have you been hiding? You're amazing. Where have you been? Well, I've just been working in Australia for the past X amount of years.
Yeah, and I don't want to criticize any international brands, but they're doing a really good job. You know, anyone below, you know, WWE, AEW, but there's no doubt some of our talent are easily capable of being, you know, main eventers at that level, let alone getting to the next levels. And you know, I do put it down to a bias. I think you touched on it. Like, there's so many independent promotions in the US. But where does the 15th best US promotion line up against the Australian ones? And honestly, I'd say the gap will be big, as in we're way ahead of where they are. But again, we saw it in baseball, right? Like, a lot of the time it was, yeah, but can we, you know, we can get that player from Texas, and you know, it's a hell of a lot easier than, you know, getting an Australian and visa, and even some of the clubs would say to me, we know your talent is better, it's further to come, and you know, all that sort of stuff, and so there's you know, we obviously have to punch above our weight to a certain degree, and part of my journey is to understand more from the talent and the athletes in wrestling in this country, because not only do they perform at a great level in my eyes, but they do it with the disadvantage of not being able to regularly perform. Like, if I get similarities in Australia, right, with baseball, again, I've draw it back. Or hockey, our talent, probably hockey, we were a stronger country, so the negatives weren't there as much. But Australian baseball's pitchers are not, you know, they're trying to, in America, they're playing 5 or 6 times a week. In Australia, they're playing once a week. Same analogy in wrestling. Our guys and girls are performing less in a perfect world as athletes, they'd be, they'd have a much more regular routine, and yet they still compete at a high level. So I think, it's certainly the Australians and New Zealand, the Oceania side has really been as big a catalyst for me as the international connections. It's just, I believe, bringing them both together is the best outcome for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, you're 100% correct, because I think this year's probably been one of my busiest for working for promotion, because I'm a wrestling manager on the shows, and going from working maybe once to twice a month to working there'll be blocks where I'll go 6 weeks where I have a show every week. Whereas if I was in America, I could probably go 12 shows in that block, because there's a Wednesday show, and then there's just not that market here in Australia at the moment for that. But it's growing.
Yeah, it is, and I think, and obviously our talent, seems to have to travel the breadth of the country to compete. But they are athletes, and as athletes, how regularly you train, but how regularly you compete. Again, now I'll bring it back to hockey or AFL. If I said, well, look, we're gonna make life a bit harder, and that hockey players used to want to probably play anywhere from 30 international matches to 30 domestic matches a year. If I all of a sudden said, well, I want you to perform at your best, but you can only perform internationally 6 times and domestically 12 times, it's a significant disadvantage. And, when I sort of thought, trying to compare my sports knowledge in the business and the sports I've worked into wrestling, I keep going, geez, imagine how good our people would be if they could regularly perform. So I think, again, hopefully, and a lot of it is, I think if talent in the overseas markets competes here in a Starrcast type event against Australian talent, then they will also become advocates, going, geez, the talent here is good. Some of the off field, so I'm still talking, old sporting terms. So out of the ring, people, managers, announcers, commentators will also be part of that uplift to go, there's a lot of talent down in Australia. And again, it's funny, just talking to people like yourself, it's the analogies are there. Referees and umpires in the sports I've worked in, it's again, disadvantaged, don't get to compete enough, don't get enough support. And I think, there's got to be a way here, because there's one thing about the industry, the enthusiasm and energy in the industry is very high. So the ambition, the sacrifices, and I've barely scratched the surface of people to speak to and work through.
Yeah. Well, so what do you really envision, like, OPW being? Is it going to be operating on like a regular promotion basis, or is it like in your mind at the moment, like a World Series wrestling where it's like 1 or 2 or 3 tours a year type thing?
Yeah, I think the first step is really to have that that brand and entity to capture the Starrcast connection. So in its absolute minimum, it's the event model to help generate the Starrcast and deliver that one event. So even it as a brand may evolve as we move forward. But certainly, I don't see it being a permanent promotion like a lot of the promotions are here. I definitely think it's more. I'm certainly more of an event focused person, so I'm looking at the events to create that are meaningful, blend international with domestic, and help bring the sport to just create a new opportunity, a new platform that's not there. So I really do, and I've said this to a lot of people, I want to collaborate where possible. Dare I say it, like other sports, I'm sure there's some internal politics inside wrestling, and some people want to work with some others and some
not at all.
I could be misreading it, but in every sport I've worked in, that's the case. So if I draw all these other analogies, I have to draw that one. But I think I certainly it's more of a business focused entity, and therefore if it's say Starrcast here, maybe I'm going to try and work with another international brand about what they can do in Australia, and then it's a different event. So it's certainly, but as was with Nick, Mickey, and Conrad, it was we want people to know what we're trying to create. So Starrcast is absolutely the best way to focus that. The OPW Oceania Pro Wrestling then becomes that landing point in Australia to connect it. But I certainly see it being more than one event, but I want to try and get the first one right, maybe a second one next year as well that can sort of tease out where things go. But very different to, say, the PWA, MCW, those sort of brands that, I think are doing, their sweet spot seems to be, delivering those monthly events and really building that fan base. So I sit somewhere and almost to the left of centre, go, connect with me where possible. I'll try and do things internationally. And yeah, very much of that international, event focused model. But who knows in the future? Like I definitely see, I have ambitions that, I think where we can go as a sport, that I've probably got to get the first part right, but yeah, could it grow to be bigger and better? Let's wait and see. But at the moment, I'm like the Switzerland of wrestling. Talk to me. I want to help collaborate, and if I don't think I can do it, or I'm not, can't make it work, that's not me.
You can tell you're early in the business because you haven't got any grudges yet, so that's great.
No, not yet. Hopefully, they won't have it for a little while. That would be. Would be a good thing. I don't intend getting in the ring. I don't want to be anywhere near the performers. As I said, my skill set is to drive some big picture stuff, the commercial business side, and let the coaches, athletes / wrestlers, managers, bookers, do their job because that's what they're skilled to do. So, but I have a vision that I said, I think we can be a stronger wrestling entity, community, and hopefully, I can play a part in that.
Mm. So because this thing's going to go for like 4 days, would you envision something like, say, the OPW being like the super show at the end of the 4 days, then maybe during the weeks having like a PWA showcase or an MCW showcase or an EPW showcase, just to maybe, I don't know, I almost see it as you could do it like it's a showcase of Australian wrestling, because with the Starrcast brand, you'd be getting a lot of people from overseas, obviously watching it on Fight as much as I guess they could. So is that something that you would possibly think of doing?
Yeah, 100%. So I think, there's the out of the ring, so the fan engagement, the priceless experiences, the working with all sorts of different, autograph sessions. Some of what have really shocked me in the last week has been, sort of the support areas around wrestling, not just, so media, comedians, music, etc. So there's that component. The wrestling part, I think, really has two key streams. It has, the Starrcast, the Ric Flair last match type. Okay, well, what are those international matches that hopefully are integrated into existing brands as well? So that, if we're connecting with Impact, what are we doing that's part of their journey? I mean, even, if I'm really ambitious, the time zone piece here lends itself to doing a lot, I think, with whether it's AEW, Impact, New Japan, NWA, the two Mexican companies with AAA and CMLL, that we could do a lot with them to sort of be, use this as your showcase in Australia rather than, big tours that maybe are not financially viable. But then the Australian piece that you mentioned is critical. So the showcasing, and I don't want to, I've always said this to a couple of the brands, I don't want to trample on what you're doing across your 12-month calendar. But if this is part of your calendar as well, absolutely, I think there's enough content, and that doesn't mean they need to be 6-hour shows.
No.
It's like, where if you've got a venue, and this is why the venue is really important in the location, because if the right one's secured, why can't there be, from 2 to 3 o'clock, we're going to see, the best of PWA, and then there's a gap and there's something else happens. And, so I think we can really, do a lot making sure that the Australian content is seen as valuable as part of the experience. And absolutely, I think it will showcase to a lot of fans, and hopefully with an Australian broadcast partner, that also brings forward opportunities for those brands as well to be part of a KO or one of any of the digital platforms that again, Australian talent is there, and if we're that platform to make it be successful, fantastic. So hopefully it's also part of the Australian promotions and what they want to do. But they can also treat it separately as well. You know what, we need to protect our audience and our what we're doing, but hey, our champion will perform or our a particular wrestler will perform. But again, in the perfect world, it's that hopefully a little bit of a higher to go. It's integrated in what they're doing without all of the challenges or the work that they have to do when somebody else is providing it. But I definitely see the wrestling content being spread over the 4 days. I think that's really important. And that's probably the difference of the US model, where the US model is, the fan engagement and then that sort of
which leads up to yeah.
And look, I love wrestling as much as most people, but some of these shows are starting to go to a length to me that is too long. And a quality over quantity approach, that puts more pressure, say, on broadcast production, but at the same time, that opens up better fan experiences. And whatever we do with this event, we're very keen that it is sustainable. So, hopefully go as well as we can in year one. You learn some stuff, and then from year two onwards, it's certainly the partners are happy, the wrestling industry is happy, and we've got something that we can all work on to build on. But yeah, I think, and probably all credit to Nick Aldis. He was the one who, without talking out of school, has suggested, quality over quantity in how it's structured. So, and that doesn't mean they're half-hour shows, but I don't think a 4-hour show is. It's not what I envisage. And, if there's 4 hours, how do you make every match feel more meaningful? And again, as you asked the question, if the Australian brands, I want to get their input as to how can I help? What works for you guys to be elevated through an event like this?
I know because I help run a promotion up here, when I time out shows, it's 2 hours, 15 to 2.5 hours max. Because I know that's myself. If I watch, and this is not a knock on them, and people will think it is, but if I watch the last AEW show, and that went for nearly 4.5 hours or something like that, I zone out myself. And I love wrestling. I watch wrestling every day. And if I can zone out from it, I can't imagine what the casual fan would be thinking. So if I can keep it 2 hours, 2.5 hours, then normally that's enough with so much action packed into it that the fans are always going to be engaged during the show.
Yeah, and I think the other one, and again, everyone, the models for how companies do their things is obviously their business, and I think there's a limit. But by doing say more shows but the time is inside, let's say, 2 hours, it actually allows for more wrestling to be created, because then I'm not trying to squeeze or say no to too many brands that deserve a platform, as opposed to now we've got plenty of room. And again, the arguments against it will be definitely production costs, heavily increased. Yeah. But then that can be modified across, rights deals and how you set up the broadcast, how you set up the sponsorship. I'm fascinated wrestling doesn't have more of a sponsorship build to it, and maybe that's the case. But when you produce events, you can be a bit different with sponsorship, because then you can say, hey, I might have 8 hours of content, not 4 hours. I just happen to have spread it over 4 days, or 2 90-minute shows a day, whatever it might be. So I think there's different ways to skin the cat here that are probably more about what this event is compared to what others would do. Because again, we're trying to hold people's attention. We're also trying to give people a break, so that if you're in a particular destination or city, they want people to enjoy the wrestling, but they want people to go out and go to movies and they go to restaurants and experience all sorts of different things. So the commercial partners, have an influence on this as well. But I do think quality over quantity and how it's structured is really, really important.
I'm just talking to you now, I'm just thinking about it, and I've been in the business for 10 years, and you've probably come along at the perfect time when most of the people I know in the major promotions are all very keen to work together. Whereas 5-6 years ago, that was not the case at all. It was you just stay over there, let me do this, you stay there. They're very much more keen. I know that PWA don't like working with MCW, and PWA come help us up here in Queensland a lot as well. Yeah. So I think you've probably hit at one of the perfect times to do it, because I've never seen people that are running these promotions more willing to work together. So that's probably very much in your favor at the moment.
Yeah, I think, and I appreciate. I think that's a really valid point. It obviously seems to be happening a bit more internationally as well, but it would be a tough model if Australian companies didn't want to, sort of collaborate. And again, everyone have maybe a different view as to what's best for their brand, and I'll always respect that, because it's one of those things. You invite people in, you try and find the perfect solution, and if you can't, well, obviously sometimes you have to make decisions, or they make decisions to do things differently. But yeah, I would hope that there seems, and again, if it's everyone's, or most companies seem to have their area. It's almost like, as I've looked into a lot of the history part, is in weird way, it's almost like the old NWA type,
the old territories.
You got the territories,
Yeah.
which in a lot of ways makes sense. And that is actually how we call it the second tier sports, like cricket and AFL and all these other ones. But that's the sporting model in Australia, is that it is based on geography, and then it's sort of the only difference is that you have state bodies and then national bodies in say the sports I've worked in. But even a lot of those sports would say that's not necessarily the right model, but the right model is certainly to have that geographical representation as far and wide as you can, and then how do you sort of find a way to elevate it up?
See, for the longest, and not the longest time, but for the last year or so, as I said, that my dream for Australian wrestling at that point was to have at least one show a week from, like, say, a PWA, then an EPW, an MCW, just one show a week on, like, Fight. So you'd work it out. So it's almost like a weekly show, but it's Australian wrestling. That would, for me, that would be my, like, ideal situation, because then every week I could watch Australian wrestling.
Yes,
and I think that's something that this could really help.
Well, and look, I think one of the things as we get into it will be, for me, is how to collaborate with the companies to go, the pinnacle of, obviously what I'm trying to do next year is the event. But again, it's not like then, all right, well, let's just wait 12 months for the next one. What could possibly come out of this is probably, we got some other things to, line up, of course, before then, but I hope people can start thinking about, well, what's the spin-off that maybe comes out of this that helps grow the industry? Mm-hmm. And look, competition is always a good thing too. So, whether it's for talent or how you're presenting your product, and, as one improves and that helps lift another one. So competitive tension can still be there inside a collaborative environment. And
exactly.
That's where, and I think the thing, and again, probably similar to my sports, is that if you're in the industry of wrestling, you want it to succeed, you want it to grow, and therefore, again, there's always going to be the odd issue, but you can be competitive, collaborate, then go back to again, what is healthy competition is when you look at someone else and go, geez, I really like that. Full credit to them. Damn, I wish I'd have thought of that first. But now I'm not going to, whether you're going to copy it or I'm going to, what can we do now? And if you have that, and hey, we've seen that in the international. I mean, we're in an industry where the wrestling product seems to be a lot better when there's competition amongst the so-called big boys, internationally. So therefore, now maybe they're not collaborating the way some of us would like them to, but at the same time, that it seems to be helping when there's competition that drives improvement across the board.
I would love to see something where, like, say MCW had a show, and then the next week it was the PWA show, and then it's like the pre-show meeting, they were like, you guys saw what they put on last week. That's what we have to top. We have to top that. So go out there. You know what I mean? That to me is like, you can work together, but that's a competitive drive. And that's like, you don't want harm on the other company, but you just want to be better than. And I don't see any problem with that at all.
Well, again, elite sport is driven by that fierce competition that sort of sits beneath it, whether it's, club competition or state versus state or whatever. But ultimately it's, in a weird way, it's almost like we get to maybe a point in the year where we can go, and now we all go, how good is Australian wrestling based on this event or something else maybe that emerges, or we start, again, like other sports might recognise it is, basketball would look at it where it's, well, how many players have we got in the NBA now? And that can only be healthy for the whole system. When a sport like that is going really strongly because it's international profile, It's got a really strong domestic league. If you're in that system, one way or another, you're benefiting from this, upsurge in improvement and the like.
Going back to to OPW, you've got Nick Aldis and Mickey James involved as producers for that, which is great because I'm a massive fan of Nick's philosophy with wrestling. I listened to him on the Not Sam podcast, and that's the way I think when I think about wrestling. Does that mean that OPW would be sort of influenced by the old NWA style, or is it something with Mickey James where you've got Mickey did the Empower show? So could you see something like a full night of the girls having a crack and showing what they can do?
Yeah, potentially. I think with both of them, I've got to know, and obviously with Conrad, everyone has a how do we keep not involved in the industry, but how do we keep moving forward? And probably Nick and I have connected with, certainly, my background is different to people he's dealt with in the past. But at the same time, from my perspective, he has a tremendous outlook on what wrestling can be, and I think he's clearly not going to be retiring anytime soon. He's probably at the peak of his wrestling, but he's also thinking about out of the ring, and he and I have certainly shared some ideas that he seems to have a tremendous brain. Like if I was looking at one of my old sports, I'd go, God, this guy's going to be a great coach in the next 5 to 10 years or whatever it might be, because he represents the wrestlers well. He's obviously got great experiences through the different promotions, and I think he has some great views again around where wrestling can be. And Mickey, I was vaguely aware of that event when it occurred, the Empower event, and getting to know the backstory to it. Like, it's incredible how quickly it was pulled together. Limited resources, almost through her brand and power and her vision. And, I think there should be something like that one way or another, whether it's in this model or something else. But, again, we see the growth of females in traditionally male-dominated sports. There should be no reason it's not applied here. We can debate, talent and all that, and quality and improvements are needed or whatever it might be. But they both will have a huge, they will drive that wrestling content as far as what we present. With my input being obviously to bring the Australian wrestling along, and also to help almost just match up to some of the broader strategic philosophies as to as I said, whether it's a 4-hour show, multiple shows, how that comes together, more from ensuring that the Australian experience is as good as possible. And then Conrad, is clearly not only incredibly well networked, but has run these conventions, these fan engagements. So he's got a lot of great IP on what works and how we can bring it together. So it's a very it's a collaborative approach where we're trying to draw off each other's skill set. But I think as far as people being able to produce wrestling content, I'm pretty happy that Nick and Mickey have jumped on board here.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I was kind of shocked when I saw it, because I was like, wow, that's next year. I really thought that the Nick would probably be signed with like a WWE or an AEW by then, and I was just like, that's a heck of a.
Look, one thing I am aware of, that wrestling can change quickly. So I'm actually going to be leaving for the US tomorrow for 10 days or so, and catching up with everyone. And it might be part of the risk management plan is to go. Maybe it's a positive though, right? So, but I'm well aware that certainly both of them. But hey, even Conrad, right? Maybe he'll get tapped on the shoulder and be brought in house somewhere. So I mean, it's one of those that it's definitely could be a risk at some point, and if it happens, then I obviously, like anything, I have to work to plan B and see. But look, he's such a great performer that it's hopefully he can do, maybe he can do both, right? And who's to say he can't? I think it's probably WWE would be, it might be a challenge, or then I'm going, hey, now I've got the biggest opportunity of all time. You know how they don't play with anyone else? Look, here's a chance, right? Just come with me on the journey. But we'll see.
You might be in a better position than what anyone else would have been 2 years ago. Now that they've got the regime in there that they have, that they would be able to work something out like that. So that's not entirely out of the question, as it probably was 3 years ago.
My biggest challenge will be, I mean, Nick's throwing down the challenge, right, to an AFL or an NRL player. So, that might be the matchup that would maybe need to change. But, look, he's a great talent. And in a lot of ways, I really, I'm a bit the same. I would expect he's going to get signed up somewhere. And but like a lot, I think certainly AEW, who I've got to know really well, they are, in my eyes, very, very progressive thinkers in how they operate. Yeah. So, if he was to land there, I'd probably see more positives than negatives for him, for me, for everyone, and who knows where it could go from there.
Yeah, they definitely are more conducive to working with other promotions, that's for sure.
And just letting talent to evolve as well, right? So, if he's going to wrestle for another, 5-10 years, again, why not let him start to think about the out of the ring aspect. Again, we again, I should really keep doing it. Like in hockey, we would encourage players towards the end of their career to start getting into coaching or other things, and not that Nick's at the end of his career, but you've got to start somewhere, and therefore, why I think it can only improve an athlete when they get exposure to whether it's the business or coaching or whatever it might be. In this case, an executive producer. So I think it'd be a really positive thing if it actually happened.
Yeah, I know, and this is just my experience, that when I see someone that's working on a show, that they sort of have that thing where they're switched on. Do you want to learn how to do this? Come and learn how to do it. Because then I've always been a biggest fan, and this is even just for wrestling, like anyone that goes and does as many seminars as possible to learn as much as you can. Adding another tool, I always say adding another tool to your toolbox. And I'm a big fan of doing that. Like any chance I get to learn something I didn't know, or something that I can maybe, it doesn't really help me, but I can apply it in another way, I'm 100% in on doing that, and to try and help other people to do that as well.
Yeah, well, look, I became a better sports executive when I started to attend, and this really changed a bit in North, but mainly when I was in hockey. I went in and Rick Charlesworth, who's our coach, and even people who don't follow hockey probably know, Rick's probably one of the best players that's ever played, one of the best coaches ever. And sitting in when he's doing his pre-match meetings, I'm not there to critique. I'm not there to value as a good coach, but as an executive, you start to understand more of the success of the on-field product, and therefore it absolutely made me a far better CEO without it changing what I do or making me then want to coach or anything contribute to that side. But I think anything that adds to your repertoire like that it can only be a good thing, unless you're a person that really, some reason your learning has been shut off, and therefore I think in the wrestling space or industry, to me seems to be probably again as important, if not more important, that you're aware of other things. Again, that doesn't mean executives need to step into the ring. I don't need to learn that part. I will talk to athletes as much as possible about
you don't want to take a few bumps,
how hard it is to be a performer, and that's not for me.
With Conrad Thompson, who you said being involved, can we expect him to bring some of his podcasts down to do live? Because I'm a massive fan of. I'll freely admit I listen to Arn, I listen to 83 Weeks, I listen to pretty much all of Conrad's content. Can you imagine? Is there an idea of bringing some of them down if they can, or are you looking at also showcasing some of the Australian guys, like say myself or On the Turnbuckle, those guys? Because a
bit of both. So again, the approach of the Australian side is to showcase as much of the industry here as possible, and again, give people an opportunity to be involved at all sorts of different levels. So, but definitely, again, like the international wrestlers, Conrad certainly having one or two of those talent that he works with. As you said, the podcasts are incredibly popular here. I think they're a really important part in the commercial push of the event for that reason. And as we know, some of the people you've mentioned, I think they I will advocate really strongly again coming out of this event for Australian wrestling. So it's definitely a natural fit. And who that is obviously something we'll work through. But I'll be shocked if that's not part of where it's headed. And who knows who he's going to have on. If we were doing this 12 months ago, I'm not. I think Jeff Jarrett started roughly at this time or whatever it was. So look, who knows who will be on his podcast in 12 months' time. But yeah, he's got such a great array of personalities that would, I think, be really popular in Australia. We'll work that in one way or the other.
And one thing I will say, and I don't know if I've told this story before, but I DM'd Comrade. This is about a year ago, I reckon, because I was hitting a wall with I didn't know how to grow this a bit. And I was like, I'll send him a message. I don't expect anyone to reply because it's. And within 24 hours, replied to me with a whole list of things that I needed to do, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't be more so I can't speak more highly of that guy just through taking his time, because he doesn't have to do that. And I'm a small Australian podcast guy. No one needs to talk to me, but just to know that he took his time out to do that meant a lot to me and made me even a bigger fan.
They've all three have been incredibly generous to me, and again have a real. They all three are internationally. Have an international outlook on the world too, so it's I think that helps a lot. And again, most people are good people, and I think that's proven. Although maybe if someone can check that I've been returned back safely about the 22nd of December, just in case. But
just in case.
It's that's it. They've been incredibly good people. I think, and to be honest, others that I've reached out to or connected that aren't sort of publicly known at the moment. I've had a lot of really good support, similar to your example, right? Just testing it out. Reach out to somebody, not trying to get war and peace, not trying to impose too much on them. But you imagine how much this happens, and if they do it for one person, they probably do it for multiple people, and therefore you go, yeah, that's great that someone is prepared to do that. Which again, I think in a lot of other sports is not the case. I think this is where professional wrestling has, many assets that I see as a business exec that we can highlight even more because whether it's, and I use a bit off tangent here, but athletes, wrestlers are promote. That's their, that's the and managers and other people. I don't think I'm going to get too many challenges of well, we really need to lift this sponsor or this destination or whatever it might be, broadcast partner.
Yeah.
The wrestling community sees that as part of their job, and again, all three sports I've worked in, I've had really good athletes to work with, but you do have your moments where people are dialing it in. I don't really want to do it. Big match coming up. Hey, sorry, Cam, we got to focus for the next 48 hours, as opposed to, look, I really need you to do the promotion 48 hours after the event, because that's when we've got all the eyeballs on us, not 3 months ago. But again, it's not to criticize those sports. It's to say one of wrestling's best assets is its ability to be a complete solution for event, partners and fans and whoever it might be, because of the build up, the event, and the post event activities. And I think to me, it's just such a great asset to have.
Yeah, I think I said a while ago the thing. I was like, the biggest thing about wrestling, in every aspect of wrestling, is selling. We try and sell tickets. We try and sell the event. We try and sell our characters. We try and sell the moves in the ring. Then we try and sell the next event during that event. It's always that's on your mind. You should always be thinking about, how do I get this across to everybody? Because that's what we want to do. We want to keep getting this thing as big as we possibly can. And that's doing that and selling it and promoting it is how you do this.
Yeah, and other sports have that challenge where, again, I've lived it and advocated for it, not just lived it, but advocated. No, we've got to focus just on this, and then we'll worry about next week. And I think it's like most things I've learned in life. You've got to really try and enhance the positives of what you've got, or the assets that you've got. Except, not everything's going to be perfect. probably not going to get a big betting partner out of this event. So not that that's a perfect outcome, but there's limitations in everything you do, and but at the same time, you minimize those, manage those, but how do you enhance your assets and your strengths? And I think wrestling's ability to be such strong in telling the sporting story that other sports would love to be able to do. Hey, can we promote as strongly as possible? Can we deliver an event that meets the expectations of the fans and the broadcasters and the partners? In theory, wrestling can do that. And then the post, as you said, building into the next and continuing the journey. Other sports go, we almost wish we could do that, but we can't. That's one of our limitations, is we can't do that. We may have a dud event. Athletes, the best athlete may not be able to promote and talk about the sport, or the coach, or and that's just life for those sports.
And the thing I think I like the most about this whole concept is the fact that you've got the Starrcast part of it, where it's not just going to be wall-to-wall wrestling the whole time. You're going to have your podcast, you're going to have your signings and all of that sort of stuff. Tying into that, I know with Starrcast they've done stuff like before with the Jeff Jarrett karaoke nights and stuff like. Would you envision like say the Aussie variety show like WrestleBrania with one of my co-hosts is Jeff Setti, who runs WrestleBrania, and he's been doing it for a few years now, and that to me would fit perfectly in something like this, where it's a comedy, wrestling comedy sort of variety show type thing.
Yeah, that's again, it's probably the bit that there's probably a lot I'm going to underestimate in the next 12 months. And that's certainly one of the early ones, is that, the call it the ancillary or the support sectors in and around wrestling that can make a great event activity, and from adults to kids as well. So I think there's some stuff that can be really good for, for whatever, demographic you fall into. And yeah, I 100% see it. I think there's so much that can be done. And again, for events, it's really important that most sporting events need to show as much. The actual event's really important, but what else are you doing? What's the other content? And I think there's just tremendous amounts of things we can do. And like other events, I probably haven't said this to anyone yet, but like other events, we're trying to attract fans and interest, but we should also be trying to attract talent. Where kids, teenagers go, geez, this is better than I thought. How do I get to do that? So it might be with the schools and academies and programs that can be run around it. There's a limit somewhere somehow, but for the next few months, I'm trying to put no limit to it. To go, if you're interested, you reach out to me, and I'll try and fit in the time, talk to you, get an understanding of what you're doing, and the other things around it, I think, are very, very important.
So what's sort of the timeline here where you'll see something where you can sort of have a solid thing of like, this is when we're doing this?
Yeah, so working backwards, we certainly think, and probably the feedback I'm getting from interested hosts in Australia, is that October, to early December, sort of literally to now, so start of October to December would be the ideal window. You can put events on around football seasons and the like, but it's maybe a bit more challenging. So, but that's sort of the window. Working back from that, we would want to have it announced where it's going to be, probably 6 months in advance. So at a minimum. So for me, the focus is then, where's this going to be? So it's a balance of a variety of different factors. That'll be the real focus into, January, February, working with Nick, Mickey and Conrad on the real structure to the event without, fixing it within an inch of its life, but having, us in agreement. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be different things that we're going to sort of debate and discuss. So that's really important. But yeah, the timeline, and then from there, obviously, as best as possible, how we can evolve what the content looks like, the wrestling content, the non-wrestling content. I see it being staggered consistently. A lot of the non-wrestling content can be focused on early, the things that we've just been talking about. Mm-hmm. But hopefully so can some of the wrestling content. And everyone who's been around it for at least 5 minutes understands, as you raised before, there might be wrestlers or matches signed that do need to change because circumstances change, injury, or they're now not able to compete. And probably the other big one is, and it's not the focus of the event. The wrestling's the focus, but that mainstream crossover impact. I would like to have that locked away, in the next month or two, to be able to work that in as it needs to be, and it's an important part of the event. So probably really. And even the name of the event, the name will be very much dependent on the locations. Starrcast Australia is definitely the working title. Maybe that's what it'll be. But Starrcast will continue, I think, forever and a day, and therefore go to other locations. Is this the offshoot of it? Is this So we'll work through what that looks like. But definitely, it's the long lead in is important, because I also do think, as we've been talking about, ideas and things that may change as we get into it based on a whole variety of factors. But I would say the first quarter is that landing where it's going to be, when it's going to be, and a structure for people to go. I need to get to that event. That's the real focus. Coming into the new year.
Well, mate, the door is always open here if you want to come in and chat about what's going on. I'm more than happy to have you on. It's been a great chat. For people that want to keep on dial about what you're doing, how can they follow you on your social medias and stuff like that?
Yeah, so jump on the Oceania Pro Wrestling.com page, which has got all the initial information, very much a landing page, but you'll see that will evolve over the next coming weeks and months as well. All the social media handles are on there. And certainly to subscribe would be really important. Very basic thing. I know we're all protective of our data at the moment. Trust me. A, it's secure, and B, the information is high level. But jump on OceaniaProWrestling.com. And really importantly, just keep an eye out. And I'm not that hard to track down. So if you're in the industry and you'd like to reach out, as I said, I don't think I've upset it too many people just yet, but please reach out. It's all I can do is, again, there'll be a point where things, are going to have to be managed with yeses and nos. But I found this worked really well for me, particularly in the baseball and hockey. Is I want to listen to people. People have got more history of the sport than I have. That's really important. I have a lot of ideas and experience, but it's no good if I'm not understanding and working with where things can go. And even if people don't agree, or they said we go on a different path, I'm not that hard to reach. And the people who've been reaching out, I feel really grateful and humble that they are, because it's what I was hoping would happen. And at the same time, you're never really sure. And and again, if you're somebody new, who's this guy? I'm not that hard to find. And if you've got ideas or interests or networks, it's and I take people as they are. So if you think somebody has said a good or a bad thing, don't even stress about that, because I just take people as they are. And if you run over my toes twice, I'm probably gonna maybe make some changes moving forward. But I'm just loving hearing from different people, and it's been you talk about what's next. The next for me is upskilling my knowledge of the industry as much as possible, because that's what will make this successful.
I can attest to how easy he is to deal with. So I think it took 2 messages. We'd had this sorted out.
And look, I do have a life, so occasionally I will maybe be a bit slow getting back to people. People who know me would go, "Yeah, he's terrible at returning phone calls." But I am easy to reach, and and I'm just, and even if people are going, I want to think about it, I want to, put an idea to him, and I want to, what do you got to lose? As your comrade stories, showed, like it's, I don't know. I do have a strong saying, and people now have heard it a lot, but you can't sell. Now I'm going to muck up my own saying. You can't sell a secret, right? So if it's a secret, you got to get it out there. You got to get it in the marketplace. And I think if people have got ideas and thoughts, absolutely. I'm not writing checks at the moment, but I'm certainly keen to engage people as much as possible.
All right, Cam Vale, thank you so much for joining me, mate.
No, thanks, Tyler. Really appreciate you inviting me on.
Pro Day Pod. You know who else is that guy?
Oh.
You know what that guy does? That guy sits in the middle and uses both armrests.
Oh,
Full spread. Full spread. That's that guy.
Okay.
That's that guy.
Right. If you take a plane, right? If you're in a plane, don't take a plane. If you're in a plane...
Yeah, don't take a plane. Bro, and
you're in the middle and you use both, you are scum. You are scum. You don't get those armrests. Wait.
Come on. We're with you. Wait, what?
No, the middle guy definitely gets those armrests.
Both of them?
Yes.
Full spread?
Yes.
I don't know, man.
No, okay, sorry. No, because I saw a meme about this. I retract everything I just said. I'm flopping right now.
Follow Broday No Plan B podcast on Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts.